Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Better Managers Briefing. My name is Will Smith. I am CMI's Public Affairs Manager, and I've got a fantastic conversation lined up with you today. I'm joined by CMI companion Zaheer Ahmad, MBE. Zaheer is a multi-award winning diversity and inclusion thought leader. He is currently Global Head of Inclusion and Diversity for Consumer Healthcare at GSK. And he's also a member of CMI's advisory committee for race equity. Zaheer, welcome. It's fantastic to have you.
Thank you, Will. A pleasure to be here.
Perfect. So it's an extremely timely conversation we're having today about inclusion. It is National Inclusion Week. We are on the 1st of October, so it is the start of Black History Month. This year, the theme is Proud to Be. So it is all about celebrating the pride that people have in their culture and heritage. I'm trying to make sure I get all the important references. So CMI is gearing up for our 75th anniversary next year, which is going to have a major focus on inclusive leadership. And today we have just launched a call for evidence around ethnicity. So if viewers, if you are a CMI member, you should hopefully receive an email in your inbox today. If you're not, we will put a link in the chat later to find out how you can get involved. Finally, fantastic news that came out last night. So the Advisory Committee for Race Equity's latest campaign, Moving the Dial on Race, last night won Best EDI campaign at the MemberCom's 2021 awards. So we are absolutely delighted. It is something that Zaheer was involved with, and I know the committee is really proud of it as a document. I know it's fantastic, and I'm sure we can get into that a bit more later. So 2 very quick pieces of housekeeping for me, then we'll get into it. Please do drop any questions you have for Zaheer in the live chat. I will try to get through as many as we can at the end of the session. Also, Zaheer has had a fascinating trailblazing career, I hope you won't mind me saying, which, as much as I would love to go into detail in this session, I fear we won't have time. So I'm also going to put in there a link to an interview we did with Zaheer at the start of the year, setting out some of the fantastic stuff he's worked on. So do check that out if you get a chance. So that's it. I'm going to let you get a word in edgeways now, Zaheer. We'll start with a really practical question. Looking at your CV, you've worked in both the public and the private sectors. I wonder if you could tell us about challenges that existed when you first started your management career, and what have you learned that had helped you overcome them that you can share with others?
That's thank you, Will. Thank you for that introduction, and congratulations to CMI for winning that award for the great, amazing work collectively. And I'm proud to be part of the team that the group of people that came together to develop that campaign. So it's an amazing achievement by CMI. So let me start by answering your question. My career started a long time ago. I don't want to reveal my age, but let's just say that it was some time ago, back when fax machines were the main mode of electronic communication, and we still had that dial-up internet with the annoying sound that it made, which was painfully slow and incredibly unreliable. So that's the sort of kind of era where we're talking about. In terms of challenges, I'm going to cover this purely from a DEI point of view, diversity, equity, and inclusion point of view. So back then, when I was new, in a sort of, my career started, the culture of a workplace was where people were very vocal about their opposition to DEI efforts. People will make racist, sexist, homophobic remarks openly, which will go unpunished because it was part of the culture. DEI at that time was like a poster on a notice board, and that's it. That was DEI efforts by the company, which was an outdated policy or statement, which stayed on a notice board for years. Talking about DEI would be considered waste of one's time, and if you are the person who brings DEI into the conversation, you'll be subject to many offensive jokes simply because you care about other people. Back then, I didn't see any ethnically diverse talent in top positions. I still don't see many faces in the, I'm talking about board level position, board -1. So, I still don't see. So I, believe those challenges still remain. From a systemic point of view, the barriers existed back then. They still exist now. I am grateful for the progress that we've made, but when we apply a wider lens, access to education, healthcare, housing, labor market, whether it's criminal justice sector, ethnically diverse communities still face challenges that they faced back then. So, I don't want to paint a very somber sort of, or take a very somber tone to it, but I do want us to connect with the reality that is, and I don't want to sugarcoat things. So yes, we are more aware of our challenges. Yes, there is more body of evidence, which is growing, which, paints a very stark picture for us. There is more investment in DEI efforts. There are more allies there are more DEI champions who are standing shoulder to shoulder with those who are marginalized or discriminated, but the progress is painfully slow. And so, the way I overcame, and there are, I can talk a lot about, my career path, and that article that you've talked earlier about sort of gives an insight into how I've navigated my career and these challenges. I want to talk about just one thing. At the beginning of my career, very beginning of early on in my career, I didn't I feel I didn't always ask the questions, a simple question, why we're doing it and how it impacts our people and our communities. And there are a number of reasons as to why I felt, when I reflect back, I was grateful for the opportunity to, become a manager in the company. I felt that, I should, the promotion is given to me because of, who I am, and, I should be, I should just, be grateful and not challenge the senior leadership, which I now know to be not right or wrong. And reflecting back, if there is one thing I would change, is that, that's something I would change at the very beginning. So my first management position, I was very young. I was promoted. I was one of the youngest manager in the company, and I was just too grateful for that opportunity. And I didn't ask as many questions as I do now, with with courage and confidence. So I guess what I'm saying, I lacked confidence, particularly when it was my first promotion. And that is something that the lesson I've learned. But the challenges, I've covered them. Systemic barriers remain. The lack of senior people. Board level positions. Back then it was the same, still is the same. Progress is not enough. It's painfully slow. And the wider challenges still exist that existed when I was starting my career.
That's really interesting. And so I think that point about having the courage and the confidence to speak out and ask those questions, do you think, do you see that we moved on at all from that point? Do you see younger people entering companies now happier to speak about that?
Absolutely. I think that is the big change that I've seen. It's a credit to, the generation, that we see entering into the workforce now. They're very empowered, they're very vocal. And this is something, that I'm proud to see this change, in people entering into the workplace, that they are not only just coming into an organization, becoming part of it, but they also want to see that change organization, and they are holding leaders to account by asking the right questions, which I didn't see when over 25 years ago. So yeah, you're absolutely right, and something that I am, very proud to see. But again, it's very much around around power to change things. So the topic of this conversation is moving beyond. We're talking about actions here. So, but I recognize the first step towards creating that sustainable, creating that change that we could sustain over time is conversation. Asking the right questions at the right time and holding people to account. So, yeah, I agree that that is the change that we're seeing.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's good to hear. Well, so you mentioned very briefly about the company culture that you faced when you first started your career, and I wanted to ask kind of more widely around that, particularly from an institutional point of view, and perhaps you're looking to balance continuity and the traditional values that the company has always had with change required to properly drive inclusion and diversity. How do you balance that? I mean, do you think that perhaps continuity and traditional values are incompatible with inclusivity?
That's a great question. I think my answer to that would be that, I've not, let me just reflect first on my career. I've not been part of an organization where there wasn't some kind of a change going on. There's always some level of change going on in an organization. Every organization that I've worked with, whether it's restructuring, whether it's digital transformation, HR transformation, and beyond. I think when we talk about continuity, the first question we need to ask is that what does that actually, how do we define continuity? And really be transparent on what we want to keep, what do we want to continue, and who is part of that decision-making process. So who's deciding that what we will continue and what we will keep, effectively. And then the change piece is very interesting because change, the word change, does something, brings fear in our minds and in our hearts because, people don't, most people don't like change. Most people don't embrace change. But when we're talking about change, we don't approach it from a human point of view, and we don't truly understand the impact of the change on individuals, which is something that I feel the organizations can do better on. I don't believe inclusion is incompatible with continuity unless what the organizations are holding on to is a tradition that is incompatible with the modern day society. So I don't believe inclusion is incompatible with any part of the business, any strategy. It adds value to the entire organization, but I recognize that not everybody sees inclusion in the same way that I see. So for me, change is positive as long as organizations, leaders, managers are being transparent in their approach to that change, and recognizing that there are people involved through in the organization. It's not just numbers and data that we're dealing with. They are real people, and it's affecting the health and well-being, the careers, possibly their livelihood, of individuals. So for me, it's adding that sort of human element to that change. But continuity, just coming back to it and just wrapping up this answer. Forgive me, I've gone around the block on this. Whenever I've heard the word of continuity, often is associated with leadership and stability. That we need the same leaders in the position to to drive continuity, to ensure there's a stability in what we're doing, to maintain the confidence. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that narrative that I constantly hear and see from organizations. So if it is the tradition and preference of individuals that they want to hold on to, then I don't believe that inclusion is compatible with that old school view and tradition that it's not fit for a modern day organization that truly cares about its people and its client, consumers, customers, and the society it operates in.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And as you say, continuity, it almost assumes that where the organization is at is the pinnacle. And if you don't want to move beyond that, then you are going to get stuck in the past. And don't worry at all about talking about change managers. You've guessed my next question there. And that was going to be around the advisory committee for race equities moving the dial report, which, as we say, has just won a fantastic and well-deserved award. And it was a report that was very much focused on driving action and really practical steps, because I think that is what, as you can guess from the title of this session and from what Zaheer is saying, that is something which is extremely important at this point. Two of the issues within the report were around developing managers' fluency in having the conversations around race equity, and also about developing diverse pipelines for management and beyond. I wonder, would you be able to talk a little bit about your experiences there and kind of the practical steps that you would give to managers today to drive those two issues forwards?
Yes, of course. Let me start by just reinforcing the point you're making about the moving the dial on race report, which came out in October, CMI report. I had the honor of contributing to that report, as well as some very eminent subject matter experts, respected individuals who contributed to this. I would encourage, I have used that report and I've shared it with a number of my contacts. I would encourage everybody to engage with the report. It's, I like the simplicity of the report. I like the topics it covers around terminology, microaggressions, building support, allyship. So I would encourage everybody on the call to, read the report, engage with the report, learn from the report, and share with your contacts as well. That is one of the example I had, in my mind to share with the audience on this call, because that's the kind of report that we need, which drives action on race equity. I try not to, I'll be very honest with you, I try not to mention the names of organization that I have seen doing some great deal of work. And there are a number of reasons for that, because there are quite a few that I would like to talk about, but we don't always have the time. And then if I don't mention somebody, then, I feel that I am being biased towards some organization, and I have a preference towards some organization. So I try not to talk about it, and I hope you'll forgive me on that. But there is one institution I would like to mention here. And the reason for that is because I had the privilege of contributing towards their race and ethnicity journey. And I was thoroughly impressed with the approach they took to understand what was going on both internally and externally. The people they spoke to, both internally and externally, the level of detail they went into to truly understand what was happening to its ethnically diverse talent. And that institution or organization is Bank of England. In July this year, they released the review of ethnic diversity and inclusion. I would encourage everybody, it's online, you can Google it, go and have a look. They have taken a very comprehensive approach to truly understand and define clearly what actions they're going to take, from employee lifecycle outcomes to lived experiences to the framework and efforts to achieve racial and ethnic inclusion. It's one of the best that I have seen, and I give credit to everyone involved, in the process. But Bank of England deserve my recognition from me for not only I'm going into this, investing in this area, but coming out at the other end with clear actions and timelines on how and by when they hoping to achieve some create and sustain change. So that is something that I wanted to mention. I've got no link with Bank of England apart from that I contributed or I advised them, but it's pretty comprehensive and it's pretty good. And so please go and have a look. And that's one example I would share.
Perfect. No, that's really, really useful, and it's always good to be able to look at what other organisations have done and take the best bits that suit your organisation and build your own strategy. So that's great. I will just pause for a second to say, please, audience, do drop a question into the live chat box if you have any. I can see a great one from Shaheen, which I had a second ago and I've just lost. I'm going to build it into my next question. So Shaheen asks, do you recommend affecting change incrementally, or I imagine kind of big bang? And if so, over what kind of time horizons? And I would add to that as well, I was going to ask you about whether when addressing issues of inclusion, diversity, perhaps discrimination in the workplace, would you approach it looking at the common themes of discrimination as a whole, or would you bring it down into the specific drivers for individual groups and protected characteristics?
That's a great question. And there isn't one answer that will apply to every organization. And let me build on that. I think it depends on where the organization is on its journey, the maturity of that organization, to DEI, to diversity, to all of understanding and awareness of
I think we are losing Zaheer. We'll give him
capabilities as well. So I think it depends on many factors. Every organization should be working to that level of granular understanding. So because the reason I say that is because you can't take a whole sort of a broader down.
So I'm just going to give Zaheer's internet a moment to catch up. Hopefully we can get him back in a second. I will just do a quick shout out. As I say, please do drop any questions you have into the live chat. Hopefully you will also see links to lots of resources in there. Today we are promoting the interview we did with Zaheer at the start of the year, which gives you a fantastic read on his background. We will put in a link to the Advisory Committee for Race Equity's webpage, and on that you will find the Moving the Dial on Race report alongside a couple of other resources. And finally, also the link to CMI 75th anniversary webpage from where you can pick up the ethnicity call for evidence that I mentioned before. So here, forgive me, I think we lost you for a second then. Are you back again, and can you hear me?
I didn't even know. Sorry. The challenges we face when we work with technology. But look, let me bring this to close. And apologies to everyone. Understand the granular details, get into the data, but don't try to boil the ocean. Know what what can you achieve, and what level of maturity exists within the organization. Ideal situation would be work over time to truly understand that different level of discrimination, multiple level of discrimination that your people face, but I don't want to say this that start off the journey by understanding all levels of discrimination, which may not be something that many organizations can get their head around it, and maybe they can, but it will take significant period of time before they can truly understand. Because if you do get there, you will be able to identify intervention solutions that really drive progress. But it's not as easy as many people think. Simply taking race and ethnicity piece, it could take a while. And we've been having this conversation since May last year. Many of us have been having conversation on race and ethnicity for many years, yet we're still not seeing that widespread change because of the complexity around, how the terminologies, how we, track, monitor data, and what. And one piece I would also say is, please, in our attempt to advance DEI, let's not forget that we don't want to be leaving anybody behind. So the allies, the champions, the majority, if you like, we want to take them on this journey as well. So the big bang is great if it can sustain the change over time and takes everybody on this journey. So, I can't give an answer that will fit everybody, because it just doesn't work. As you mentioned earlier, Will, that every organization is on their own journey. Yes, there are best practice out there that we can share, but doesn't mean that it will create the same kind of change and effect and impact in your organization, just because it worked somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, after losing you for a second, I'm going to move on to a question about technology now. I hope you don't mind. I was going to ask you for your best examples, your favorite examples where you've seen either kind of technology or data being used to drive inclusion and diversity. I'm going to put you on the spot as well and say, I love the VR, the virtual reality example we've got in your interview. So if you don't mind, I would love you to talk about that.
Yeah, you've put me on the spot. So let me start by talking about data. Data is incredibly powerful, and I take a very sort of evidence-based approach to DEI, and use data in day-to-day decision making, if you to make better informed decisions. And I would I can talk about my current employer and what we're doing to around technology, data, dashboards, and beyond. But now that you've brought out the virtual reality experience, so let me talk about my previous employer, EY, Ernst & Young, which took which invested a great deal of time, energy, and effort in looking at our data, understanding the data and what was causing the that data, because data alone doesn't really always give us all the answers. So you need to have a narrative that brings that data to life. And technology can be great tool to advance for this DEI learning, but advancing understanding and awareness of individuals on DEI. So the virtual reality experience came about as a result of my sort of me thinking about what is new within DEI space. What can we do? Because most of the things we talk about, because we're still dealing with the behavior or trying to change the behaviors of individuals that we would 10 years ago, 20 years ago existed, and we're still facing similar challenges as talked about earlier. But there is this something more powerful about technology, about future innovation, how we can make it more interactive, how we can bring the reality of our communities into the organization in a much more impactful, powerful way. So that this sort of thoughts developed into an idea that we could explore virtual reality experience, and that led to us creating an experience based on a young Black man's life who was thinking about joining EY but wasn't sure because he didn't see people who looked like him in the organization. It was very powerful because the script of that virtual reality experience was written by young Black people from our communities who had no links with EY, and they were given the full freedom to be as open, frank, and honest in the script, which we then recorded. And it was incredibly powerful. I think it was about 7 minutes long. And there's a conversation with the parents, with the friend, and it's very, very, very powerful. So I believe there is a role for technology to play, to advance DEI efforts. But when we talk about data, I do want to just touch on one thing, because my conversation with the organizations often focus on data around recruitment, progression, or retention. One area we avoid talking about, which does impact not just ethnically diverse talent, but women as well and other minority groups, it's appraisals, grievances, disciplinaries, performance awards. And this is something, most organizations avoid. And, I'm very much interested in, taking a deeper dive in the data that affects the outcome of, a process that organization applies across the employee life cycle. And if we are just only looking at promotion data, development data, or whichever data you set you're looking at, and we're avoiding something which is having an impact on the career of an ethnically diverse talent, then to me it makes sense for you to actually look across the employee's life cycle and turn every stone to truly understand. And those who have looked at this data, they've found similar disparities that we see elsewhere across the organization. So for me, my ask would be, if it's an incredibly sensitive um, data set, and many organizations feel incredibly nervous to look into it, but not sure, maybe there is this nervousness come from that they don't want to, if they look into it, they'll find something and then they'll have to perhaps address it. But look, it's incredibly important. It's critical for you to truly get that, the full understanding of what's happening with your people. And if you don't look at this particular piece, and we know disparities exist, and we've seen this in public sector as well, and there are various different reports that in the past have come out that talk about, ethnically diverse talent subject to more disciplinary procedures. They're being given more higher or harsher sanctions as a result of the outcome of those disciplinary procedures. So I would, I would say that please don't avoid looking into areas which may make an uncomfortable reading for you. But the sooner you know, the sooner you can address those challenges.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting, and it goes back to what you were saying before about thinking about the individual's experience, isn't it? Because whilst a company can tell you how many members of different communities they've recruited, that isn't what impacts an individual's life. It is whether they are, as you say, receiving disciplinaries or receiving commendations. So that is a really, really. I was kind of thinking the VR is a lovely headline and it's a nice kind of visual thing of what you're looking at. But as you say, that is probably 5% of the effort, whereas 95% of the effort is that data beforehand, which understands the experience. So I'm very aware we're running to time. I have got a great question from Jen, and then I'm going to finish up with a concluding question. So Jen asks, if you were building a business from scratch, how would you go about ensuring that inclusion was at the heart of the organization? I don't know if you have any principles that you think organizations, maybe perhaps SMEs or startups, should be thinking about.
That's a great question, Jen. Thank you for asking. I think inclusion should be part of the purpose and values of the organization. So I would, the purpose of the business and what values we want, what values we want our people to exhibit or to uphold. Because for me, this is much more than just a strategy, a part of the business that we have to do. This is very much about our, it's very much about humanity, is respect and dignity towards another individual. So it's, for me, it's, and I say this, and maybe it's not making sense to people, but this is not something that we do because, yes, we know there is a business case for it. Yes, we know it's great, it's it drives innovation, it adds to bottom line, there's various different things. But when you're starting your journey, ask yourself the question why you want to do this. And I think it needs, the answer needs to come from you as an individual, from which is connected to your core values. And I think if you can find that connection, it will help you to articulate that in from a business of the business, but if you're not sure, speak to your stakeholders, look at what's happening in our communities and what it is that the business is trying to achieve and how you can be a responsible business, not just from DEI point of view, from from environmental sustainable point of view as well, from societal political issues as well that will come into play as well, because the world is changing. It's not just DEI that we need to pay attention. There are many other global challenges that every business is is facing and needs to have a position on, and in order to play their part in helping us create a just and fair world, a greener world. So yeah, for me it starts with you as an individual before it comes into the business.
Perfect. What a great answer. I could sit and talk with you all afternoon here, but unfortunately, we do not have that time booked in your diary. I'm gonna finish now with one classic concluding question of the interview style, and that is, if you could have our viewers take away and internalize one message from this session today, what would it be?
Okay, that's thank you for asking that question. So I'm going to say, resist the urge to automatically rushing into decisions because it's what the company wants you to do. Understand the policies, processes that you have been asked to support or oppose. Take the time to hear both sides, and when in doubt, pause to consider, and please ask the question, even if it's the very simple and basic question of why.
Awesome. Perfect. Zaheer, thank you so much for your time today. We have covered so much ground in a very short half an hour, slightly nearer 40 minutes. But thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, audience. If you're not a member of CMI yet, please do check out the links in the live chat. There are lots of resources in there today and lots of fantastic comments coming up. I'm sorry I couldn't get to more questions. Zaheer, as I say, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I hope we will see you and our viewers at future Better Managers briefings. Thank you very much and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Will.